Welcome back to Stoic Wisdom TV. Most people don't wake up with the intention of ruining their lives. No one sets out to betray their values, destroy their relationships, or dismantle everything they've worked so hard to build. Yet, the path to ruin is not a sudden plunge, it's a slow, almost imperceptible descent, paved with tiny steps that seem harmless in the moment. There's a harsh, unspoken truth about human nature that many fail to see. A truth that makes even the most committed individuals vulnerable to temptation. This vulnerability isn't a sign of weakness or a lack of morals, it's a reflection of how deeply wired we are for connection, validation, and the thrill of the unknown. For married women, in particular, this truth can make them susceptible to a slow erosion of boundaries, not because they're inherently flawed, but because human nature is a battlefield where desire often wages war against duty. The Stoics understood this battle well. They taught that the good life is not about avoiding temptation altogether, it's impossible, but about mastering your response to it. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Temptation will always exist, but the power to resist lies within your control." In this exploration, we'll uncover why some married women become vulnerable to external attention, how they rationalize their actions, and what ultimately leads to the breaking point. More importantly, we'll examine this through the lens of Stoic philosophy, offering a path to resist the slow descent into ruin and to live a life of virtue, even in the face of human nature's deepest flaws. At the heart of every great marriage is a partnership, a bond built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and deep emotional connection. As the actress Helen Mirren once said, "A great marriage is a bond that withstands time, trials, and temptations." But not all marriages remain as strong as they once were. Over time, the initial spark that brought two people together can fade, not because of a lack of love, but because of the natural drift that occurs when life becomes routine. For some married women, this drift creates a void, an unspoken longing for something they've lost along the way. This longing isn't always about physical attraction or a desire to escape. It's often much deeper, rooted in a fundamental human need for emotional intimacy. Women, in particular, are wired for connection, not just the physical presence of a partner, but the feeling of being truly seen, heard, and understood. In the early stages of a marriage, this intimacy is often intoxicating. Late-night conversations, stolen glances, the thrill of being chosen. These moments create a sense of aliveness that feels electric. But as the years pass, the demands of life take over. Conversations that once explored dreams and desires turn into logistical discussions about grocery lists, household chores, and schedules. Passion gives way to duty, and in the worst cases, a woman begins to feel invisible in her own marriage. This is where the danger begins. Dr. John Gottman, a renowned relationship psychologist, has argued that the silent killer of relationships isn't conflict, it's indifference. When a woman no longer feels noticed by her husband, her subconscious mind begins to seek validation elsewhere, often without her even realizing it. A simple compliment from a stranger, a conversation with a man who listens intently, a moment where she feels interesting again. These small interactions can feel like oxygen after years of emotional suffocation. As the writer Mitch Albom once noted, people will do anything to avoid being lonely, even if it means losing themselves in the process. From a Stoic perspective, this void is a test of character. The Stoics believed that true contentment comes from within, not from external validation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your men, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." A woman who feels invisible in her marriage may be tempted to seek attention elsewhere, but the Stoic path calls her to look inward. Instead of chasing fleeting moments of validation, she must ask herself, why do I feel this void? What can I control to address it? Perhaps the answer lies in rekindling the connection with her husband through honest communication, or in cultivating her own sense of purpose and self-worth. The Stoic doesn't run from discomfort, faces it head-on, knowing that true fulfillment comes from aligning her actions with her values, not from seeking external approval. But human nature often pulls us in the opposite direction. Psychologists have identified a phenomenon known as the Coolidge effect idea, that novelty triggers desire. Both men and women are drawn to the excitement of the unknown. And for a woman who has been married for years, the predictability of her daily life can become stifling. If every day looks the same, if every interaction feels rehearsed, then the slightest spark of something new can feel electrifying. It's not that she doesn't love her husband, or that she's a bad person, it's that she misses the thrill of feeling wanted. As F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote, "We are most alive when we are in love." But love, in the Stoic sense, is not just about the initial rush of passion, it's about choosing your partner again and again, even when the excitement fades. Another overlooked factor is the loss of social identity. Before marriage, a woman is often seen as an individuala mystery, someone with dreams, passions, and a unique sense of self. After marriage, her identity often shifts to the roles she plays: wife, mother, caretaker. While these roles are beautiful, they can also be restrictive. If a woman no longer feels like her own person, she may begin to seek interactions that make her feel separate from her role-less interactions, that remind her of the confident, independent version of herself she thought was long gone. Sometimes, those interactions come in the form of another man who sees her not as a wife or a mother, but as a woman. The Stoic response to this loss of identity is to reclaim it through self-mastery. Epictetus taught that our true identity lies in our character, not in the roles we play for others. A woman who feels defined by her roles can rediscover her individuality by focusing on what she can control: her thoughts, her actions, her virtues. Instead of seeking validation from another man, she can cultivate her own passions, pursue her own growth, and remind herself that her worth is not tied to how others see her. The Stoic path is one of self-reliance, where true freedom comes from within. No one wakes up one day and decides to betray their marriage. The descent into infidelity, whether emotional or physical, is a slow, slippery process, one that begins long before any lines are crossed. It starts in the smallest moments: an innocent conversation, a lingering glance, a text that makes her heart beat just a little faster. At first, everything feels harmless. "I'm just talking to him," she tells herself. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not like I'm cheating. But the human mind is a master of self-deception. When an action feels good, but conflicts with one's moral values, the brain creates excuses to bridge the gap. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance, tension that arises when our actions contradict our beliefs. When that tension becomes too much to bear, the mind bends reality to protect itself. As the physicist Richard Feynman once said, "The easiest person to fool is yourself." A woman who was once completely loyal begins to play mental games to justify her behavior. She downplays her actions. "It's just flirting. I'd never actually do anything." She shifts the blame. "If my husband paid more attention to me, I wouldn't need this." She compartmentalizes. "This has nothing to do with my marriage. This is just something separate from me." The more she justifies, the further she's willing to go. From a Stoic perspective, this justification game is a failure of reason. The Stoics believe that the mind should be a fortress, guided by logic and virtue, not swayed by fleeting desires. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." The justifications a woman creates are a product of her imagination, a way to avoid the reality of her actions. A Stoic would urge her to confront the truth head-on. Is this behavior aligned with my values? Am I acting in a way that I would respect in myself years from now? By stepping back and examining her actions through the lens of reason, she can break the cycle of self-deception before it spirals out of control. But the mind's ability to rationalize is powerful, especially when emotions are involved. For many married women, the first betrayal isn't physical, it's emotional. This is what makes it so dangerous. Physical infidelity has clear boundaries. There's no gray area in kissing or sleeping with another man. But an emotional affair is far more insidious. Late-night texts, conversations that go deeper than they should, sharing personal struggles with another man instead of her husband. These actions may seem harmless at first, but they create a connection that begins to detach her from her marriage. As an unknown author once said, cheating isn't always a physical act. The moment you start keeping secrets from your partner, you've already crossed the line. The final and most dangerous rationalization is the "I deserve this" mindset. At this stage, a woman no longer sees her actions as questionably become justified in her mind. I've sacrificed so much for this marriage, she tells herself. I deserve to feel good again. He's ignored me for years. If he doesn't care, why should I? I've been faithful for so long, and it's gotten me nowhere. Once she believes her actions are justified, there's no turning back. In her mind, crossing the line isn't betrayal, it's justice. The Stoics would see this mindset as a betrayal of virtue. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." The "I deserve this" justification is neither right nor true, it's a distortion of reality. A way to avoid the hard work of addressing the root causes of her dissatisfaction. A Stoic would encourage her to face the discomfort of her marriage head-on, to communicate with her husband, to seek solutions within the bounds of her vows. The path of virtue is not the easy path, but it's the one that leads to true peace. Every story of temptation has a breaking point, a moment where the game is no longer a game, where just talking turns into something real. In psychology, this is explained by threshold theory, the idea that the hardest part of crossing a moral boundary isn't the act itself, it's doing it the first time. The first time she sends a message she knows she shouldn't. The first time she meets up with him just as friends. The first time she feels his hand linger and doesn't pull away. These are the moments that shift everything. After that first step, the second step is easier. As Aristotle said, what we do repeatedly, we become. What once felt forbidden starts to feel normal. The biggest lie people tell themselves on this dangerous path is, I can stop whenever I want. But the truth is far more sobering. Neuroscientists have found that romantic and sexual attraction activate the same brain pathways as drug addiction. The dopamine rush of a new connection feels intoxicating, like a hit of something she didn't even realize she was craving. Even if she tells herself, this is the last time, she'll find a reason to go back, not because of the other man, but because of the feeling she gets when she's with him. At this point, it's no longer about him, it's about her need to feel alive again. From a Stoic perspective, this addiction to feeling is a failure of self-control. Epictetus taught that we must distinguish between what is in our control and what is not. We cannot control the dopamine rush of a new connection, but we can control our response to it. A Stoic would urge her to step back, to recognize the fleeting nature of this feeling, and to ask herself, is this worth sacrificing my integrity? Is this worth the pain it will cause? The Stoic path is one of discipline, where we choose long-term virtue over short-term pleasure. As the whether emotional or physical progresses, the lies become easier. The first time she hides a message, the first time she makes an excuse, the first time her heart races when her husband asks, "Who are you texting?" It feels wrong. But the human mind is terrifyingly adaptable. Over time, the guilt turns into strategy. She gets better at covering her tracks, compartmentalizing so well that she no longer feels guilty. She starts belying her own lies, and this is where the spiral truly begins. The longer the secret exists, the harder it is to escape. She might tell herself, I'll end it next week, next month, soon, but weeks turn into months. And by the time she realizes she's trapped in her own web, it's too late. The final shift happens when she stops seeing her marriage as her primary relationship. Her husband becomes the other man, while the real connection, the real passion, the real intimacy happens elsewhere. At this stage, even if she hasn't physically crossed the line, her heart already belongs to someone else. When that happens, there are only two possible endings. She gets caught, or she walks away from her marriage, unable to live a double life any longer. The Stoics understood this breaking point as a consequence of failing to guard your mind. As Samuel Johnson wrote, the chains of habit are too weak to be felt until they are too strong to be broken. The Stoic path is one of vigilance, constantly examining your thoughts, your actions, and your desires to ensure they align with your values. A single moment of weakness can set you on a path you never intended to take. But the power to stop lies in your ability to pause, reflect, and choose differently. So why are some married women vulnerable to temptation? It's not because they're weak-willed or immoral, it's because human nature is wired to seek what feels good, even when it's wrong. It starts with small excuses, tiny justifications, but if left unchecked, those justifications turn into actions. Once the line is crossed, there's no going back. But the Stoics offer a way out, a path to resist the slow descent into ruin, and to live a life of virtue, even in the face of temptation. The first step is self-awareness. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Look within. Do not allow the true nature of anything that can benefit you to escape your notice." A woman who feels the pull of temptation must look within herself and ask, "Why am I seeking this? What void am I trying to fill?" By understanding the root of her longing, she can address it directly, whether through honest communication with her husband, rediscovering her own passions, or seeking professional support. The second step is self-control. Epictetus taught that we must focus on what is within our control and let go of what is not. We cannot control the allure of a new connection, but we can control our response to it. The Stoic doesn't suppress her desires, acknowledges them, examines them, and chooses to act in alignment with her values. When temptation arises, she pauses, takes a breath, and asks, "Is this worth sacrificing my integrity? Is this worth the pain it will cause?" The third step is commitment to virtue. The Stoics believe that the good life is a life of virtually in accordance with reason, courage, justice, and self-discipline. A woman who feels tempted must remind herself of her commitments, not just to her husband, but to herself. She must ask, "What kind of person do I want to be? What legacy do I want to leave?" The Stoic path is not about perfection, it's about progress, about choosing virtue over vice, even when it's hard. Finally, the Stoic path calls for resilience. Temptation will always exist, but so will your ability to resist it. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind, as labor does the body." Each time you resist temptation, you strengthen your character. Each time you choose virtue over desire, you become more of the person you want to be. The Stoic doesn't seek to avoid life's challenges, faces them head-on, knowing that they are the forge in which her character is shaped. The slow descent into ruin is not inevitable. While human nature may make us vulnerable to temptation, we are not powerless against it. The Stoics teach us that the good life is within our control, not because we can avoid desire, but because we can choose how to respond to it. For a married woman who feels the pull of external validation, the path to resistance begins with awareness, continues with self-control, and ends with a commitment to virtue. By understanding the unspoken void that drives her longing, the justifications that cloud her judgment, and the breaking point that turns temptation into reality, she can take steps to guard her mind and her heart. She can choose to address the root causes of her dissatisfaction, to communicate openly with her husband, and to cultivate her own sense of purpose and self-worth. She can choose to live a life of integrity, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable. The power of this knowledge lies in its ability to make the invisible visible. When you understand the silent signals of temptation, you can see what others miss. You can read between the lines, recognize the early warning signs, and take action before the descent becomes irreversible. With this awareness, you'll never be blind to the game again, and you'll have the tools to rise above it, to live a life of virtue, and to become the person you were meant to be. If this message resonates with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more content that will help you create the life you truly deserve. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.